My name's Michael. If you haven't met me, I'm a deputy principal kind of sort of role as my day job. I've been coming to this church since the day it started, which is pretty cool. And today I get the privilege of having a chat about what God might have to say to you. A couple of weeks ago, just a little intro story about myself, I got rid of my Toyota Camry. It's a blue car. It had done 260,000 kilometres. Here's its last day. I took a photo, getting on the back of a wrecker's thing. Every day when I drove that to work, before I drove it to work, I'd have to walk over to the car and smack it as hard as I can to put the fender back inside of the thing because it kept popping out because it was so stuffed. My 6-year-old son one day just opened the handle and the handle came off into his hand. So one door just didn't work anymore. It had done its dash. And so we replaced the car. We replaced the car a couple of weeks ago with a Kia Sportage. Not a brand new one. I'm not like one of those people, but a nicer one, much nicer. I reckon I'd spent my whole life up to that point kind of curating this version of myself that didn't care about how I looked. I can drive the rubbish car. I don't care. I'm above that. Turns out when you have now a nicer car, it's all a lie. Because when I now drive to events where people who know me and see what car I drive, I've realised I'm no longer embarrassed. There you go. That little bit of pride actually was there all along. It was just hidden. Because there is something about wealth. There is something about possessions that does infect the human heart. No matter how much we like to pretend, it doesn't. And so this morning, we're going to talk a little bit about that, a bit about wealth and possessions and how it affects the human heart. And I want to flag at the beginning here that I've preached, I reckon, in my lifetime probably 100 times and have never once spoken on money. And the reason is I don't like it when churches talk about it. Maybe you are a church person and you are with me on that one, and now that you've learnt that I'm about to talk about it, you're a bit annoyed that you came today. I was feeling tired and thought I better come anyway. Suck it in, you're here now, it'd be awkward if you leave. I don't like it because I've seen guilt be used as a weapon. And I've seen churches do bad things with money. And so I've also been convicted in the last couple of weeks as I've prepared today to realise that doesn't make me more faithful to avoid the subject. So I hope with that precursor in mind, you might be able to understand where I'm coming from, and hopefully we can do this journey a little bit together. Yeah? All right, we're in Luke chapter 12. The chapter begins telling us to set in the scene. It says, meanwhile, when a crowd of many thousands had gathered so that they were trampling on one another. This is one of the things about when Jesus started his public ministry. He was so popular. Lots and lots of people would show up to hear what he had to say. He was the ultimate influencer. He was like KO Stadium before KO Stadium. People would come to hear what he had to say. And at this particular event, where he was having his chat, in this story, a bloke decides to put up his hand and ask a question. I don't know if you have a friend who, whenever you're at a meeting, feels obliged to put up their hand and ask a question. They're usually a bit annoying. I remember at university, those slightly older people in the front row called mature age students who would always ask a question. I just want to go and have my cheap burger at the Refec and you got to ask a question. This is one of those guys. And he asks, I think, a kind of funny question. He puts up his hand and this is what it says. It says, someone in the crowd said to Jesus, "Teacher, tell my brother to divide the inheritance with me." I reckon his brother was there. I reckon my boys would do this to their brother. I know I'm probably reading Australian culture into this interaction, but I can see a situation where you go and see a speaker with your bro, and one of the Scales boys goes, "Hey, I'm going to throw this guy under the bus, you watch this." I can see that happening. It's like you're in the staff meeting, and someone puts their hand up and says, "Will the managers be also taking a pay cut?" Or someone puts their hand up and says, "Will Shana now have to put her stationery away?" Everyone was asking that question. It's so awkward to say it out loud. Like, what the heck was this guy doing? Jesus didn't take the bait. Jesus replied in an unusual way. This is what it says. It says, Jesus replied, "Man, who appointed me a judge or an arbiter between you?" In other words, what the heck? This is your family stuff. Why am you drawing me in? Then he said to them, watch out. Be on your guard against all kinds of greed. Life does not consist in an abundance of possessions. He didn't say, all right, brother, you need to hear this. Nor did he say to the guy who asked the question, no, you need to hear this. He actually said, all of you need to hear this. Both of you and all of you need to watch your hearts. And then Jesus illustrated this through a story, which I'll read for you in verbatim. Here's what it says. And he told them this parable. The ground of a certain rich man yielded an abundant harvest. He thought to himself, what shall I do? I have no place to store my crops. Then he said, this is what I'll do. I will tear down my barns and build bigger ones, and there I will store my surplus grain. And I'll say to myself, you have plenty of grain laid up for many years. Take life easy, eat, drink, and be merry. But God said to him, you fool, this very night your life will be demanded from you. Then who will get what you have prepared for yourself? And Jesus says, this is how it will be with whoever stores up things for themselves, but is not rich toward God. Let's pray. Heavenly Father, we thank you for your word, that you speak to us, to people then and to people today with the same words. And we pray on a difficult topic for some of us, with a bit of baggage perhaps attached, that we will come with an open heart this morning to hear what it is you would have to say. Amen. Tell my bro to give me some money. Jesus replies, watch out. It's a strange reply. Watch out. Tim Keller, a very wise theologian, thinks that this watch out is a really good place to begin to unpack what Jesus is trying to say to us. That there's something insightful that can be gleaned just from the watch out. Here's what Tim Keller says. He said, I don't know of any place where Jesus says, watch out, be on guard against adultery. Why not? Is it because adultery isn't as destructive as greed? No. The answer is, it's because adultery isn't as deceptive as greed. Get this here. Almost always you know when you're committing adultery, but almost never do you know when you've gotten into the equally soul-destroying sin of greed, materialism, and money centricity. Jesus has to say, watch out for greed, because blindness to the condition is an intrinsic part of the condition. Nobody who's greedy feels they're greedy. Nobody who's materialistic feels they're materialistic. In our world, money is something of a scoreboard to measure how we are doing, literally a number to measure how we might be doing, whether that be good or not so good. And I think it can be hidden behind phrases that we now see commonplace when it comes to talking about money. We call the accumulation of wealth things like being responsible, providing for the family, financial freedom, enjoying what we have earned, building a better future. And those can all be good things, which I think is why money is so spiritually dangerous. Greed rarely introduces itself as greed. It accidentally shows up along the way. In the 18th century, there was this very successful, I guess that's the right word, powerful dude named John Wesley, who led an evangelical movement. It was an incredible move of God. And something happened at the end of it that John Wesley wasn't expecting. Addictions were broken as people encountered God. Families became more stable. People became more diligent, honest, disciplined. And in the ordinary course of life, it turns out that if you're hardworking and responsible, you'll often get wealthier. And that led to something that Wesley didn't expect. Here's what he says in slight old-fashioned English. Wherever true Christianity spreads, it must cause diligence and frugality, which, in the natural course of things, must beget riches. And riches, turns out, naturally beget pride, love of the world, and every temper that is destructive of Christianity. Wesley was mourning a reality he was not expecting, that if the gospel only lives in economic and social change, when worked through, you will still find a trapped heart at the end of it. This is a genuine challenge of Christian ministries, things like Christian schools, aged care, social services, that the social good that these undoubtedly bring can be so successful in a worldly sense that eventually the organisation only exists to preserve itself. Similar with churches, a church can become stable and successful and well-resourced, and then slowly preserving the institution becomes more important than serving the kingdom. Comfort becomes the measure of health. Consumers become the people we are trying to please. The blessing becomes the thing we are frightened to lose. This is why what Jesus is saying is so shocking, because the harvest is strong. The business is expanding. The assets are growing. The man has a retirement strategy. He's getting bigger barns. He is not lazy. He's not corrupt. He's not reckless. By every standard we have in Australia, we would say this bloke has done well. And yet Jesus says, "You fool." Does Jesus say he's against hard work? Nope. He doesn't say he's against planning, against saving. Jesus doesn't say he's against investing. He doesn't say he's against big barns. The man's foolishness is not that he has wealth, it is something else. I don't know about you, but I know for me, I don't want to get at the end of my life and find out all of those hours I poured into my job were for nothing. And that's what Jesus is saying happened to this man, that all those hours were for nothing. And so in his story, I think he reveals two traps that greed has for us, two ways to escape it. Let's talk about the traps. Notice when the story is introduced, the man in the parable. Count the number of times it says it. I. The man worked, he planned, he managed, his effort was real, but he did not make the sun shine, he did not make the rain fall. He did not create the soil, his body, his intelligence, his health, or another day in his life. And the same is true of us. Whatever wealth we have may have included sacrifice, skill, restraint, and good decisions, but it also includes things we don't self-create: where we were born, peace and political stability, education system, roads, hospitals, and infrastructure, the whole law-based economic system, people who taught and helped us, colleagues who carried the load, opportunities that arrived at the right time, even some of the qualities we are tempted to take credit for, like discipline, resilience, confidence, financial literacy, were often formed in us by people and experiences we did not choose. This is not to say that effort is irrelevant. It is just not the whole story. The rich man's first mistake is that he treats this blessing as entirely of his own authorship. He assumes that because he's got a big barn, its source must be entirely him. And notice how he reaches this conclusion. It begins with the phrase, he thought to himself. He consulted the one person most likely to agree with him. ChatGPT. Himself. There is no friend, there is no family, there is no neighbour, there's no community of discernment. There is nobody to ask him, why do you think this has been entrusted to you? Who could this abundance bless? There's no people around him who have needs for him to see a need and to fill a need. There's no serendipity. One of the telltale signs of someone caught in greed is in a life centered around self. Money closes our world. It makes it small. I like reading leadership books. It's one of my things. Good to Great is a good one by Jim Collins. One of the things he noticed about great leaders is they don't take credit for stuff. They recognize it's not just about them. Here's a great quote from him. It's a good one. It says, when confronted With the undeniable fact of their extraordinary success, the good to great CEOs had a great propensity to point out the window to factors other than themselves to pin the blame for that success, being very careful to give credit to other people and to good luck. But when asked about setbacks and failures along the way, the good to great CEOs never pointed out the window. They would stand in front of the mirror and say, I am responsible. I reckon Jesus would agree with Jim. I reckon Jim would agree with Jesus. The first trap that we can fall into is the belief that I built this alone. The second trap is that this will save me. The rich man's second mistake is hidden in this verse here. It says, you have plenty of grain laid up for many years. Take life easy and drink and be merry. Mate, that sounds pretty good to me. I'd like to do that. I'd love to have enough cash to remove uncertainty, to finish the mortgage, travel, look after my kids, and stop worrying about what life might throw at me next. The problem is that the man is asking wealth to do for him what wealth cannot do. Here's some beliefs that you probably have, but you would never say out loud, and maybe your choices secretly reveal. Once I have enough, I will feel secure. Once I am comfortable, my soul will finally be at rest, and a comfortable life is the best kind of life available to me. The man thinks, if I can just build a bigger barn, I will finally be okay. What he doesn't know is that enough is a moving target. The larger the barn, the more there is to protect. And the freedom of the soul is not ultimately a storage problem. He's trying to engineer a future where he's never vulnerable, never caught short, never needs anyone, and doesn't need God. You know who even worked this out that I think is pretty cool? George Lucas. I don't know if there's any Star Wars fans in the room. I am one of them. Even the bad movies I like. There's this interview of him talking about what the heck is going on with the dark side. If this makes an excuse to watch a Star Wars movie today, go home and do it. Here's what he says. He says, what happens when you go to the dark side is that it goes out of balance and you get really selfish and you forget everybody. When you want stuff and you get stuff, then you get afraid someone's going to take it away from you. He keeps going. Once you become afraid that somebody's going to take it away from you or you're going to lose, then you start to become angry. And that anger leads to hate. People are quoting Yoda in their heads. And hate leads to suffering, mostly on the part of the person who is selfish because you spent all your time being afraid of losing everything. And you've got everything you've got instead of actually living. We often work to eliminate hardship and remove friction, but the human heart is not designed that way, and not all hardship is the enemy. Perseverance produces character. Sacrifice deepens love. Dependence creates community. Reliance on others is not a bug in life. It's actually part of the design. Comfort is a gift. Oh my gosh, it is such a gift. But it is not God. A life organized around pursuing comfort will eventually make every sacrifice feel unreasonable, every interruption feel offensive, and every person who needs something from you will feel like a threat. Comfort is an unworthy ultimate goal for your life, and money can't promise it to you anyway. I don't want to be trapped in this. And I think I'm at risk of being trapped in it. In about 5 years' time, all my kids will have finished private school. Thank God. And some of the pressures that we're experiencing as a family will start to disappear. And this is telling me that is probably one of the biggest risk moments in my life I'm staring down the barrel of. I think men in particular are susceptible to this. And I'm probably just saying that because I am one and I know I'm susceptible to this. But I've often found myself in conversations with blokes around my age, having a drink after work, and how quickly it goes to accumulation being the measure of your success in life. So what's the Jesus way in this then? If I don't want to be stuck in this trap of I built this alone and this will save me, how do I escape? In the passage, God says to the rich man this very night, Your life will be demanded from you. Then who will get what you have prepared for yourself? This is how it will be. Whoever stores things up for themselves is not rich towards God. To be clear, death is not what made the man a fool. Rather, death revealed the foolishness that was already there. He had spent his life building something he could not keep. And in that question he asked, who will get what you have prepared? The implicit answer is no one. What Jesus is saying here is that wealth needs to be leveraged for things that will last beyond your life. What Jesus is saying is that money is not the purpose. Money is supposed to be a tool placed in service to the greater purpose. Love God. Love your neighbor. This is why Jesus can speak so strongly about money without ever suggesting that money itself is evil. He never says money is the root of evil. It's the love of money. In the story of the Good Samaritan, money pays for healing. Elsewhere, women are praised for supporting Jesus' ministry financially. In another strange parable later in Luke, which you may read this week if you're doing the read along the New Testament that some of us are doing this year, there's a story called the story of the shrewd manager, which is a guy who uses someone else's money temporarily entrusted into him to build relationships with other people and gets praised for doing so. The message here is clear. Jesus is trying to say you should invest in things that last. And what do Christians believe lasts? People. We believe that people are eternal. We believe that love can last beyond this world, that the kingdom will last beyond this world, and the people that we live with and do life with in faith will last beyond this life. So Jesus is challenging us to use our wealth, to prepare our wealth to the benefit of others. This means in our day and age, right this week perhaps, to use your home for hospitality, to use your money to relieve suffering, to use your business to dignify people, to use your success to open doors for others, and to use your estate to secure a lasting blessing. It's not about giving a cut to Jesus, it's about our possessions getting paid into an everlasting economy. In another sermon, Jesus calls this treasure in heaven, or sky treasure. And the best people in my life seem to have figured this out. I'm not one of them. I don't look in the mirror and think I'm one of those ones. I'm not one of them. But I'm challenged by this to become someone working towards letting God use my wealth for something that lasts. A friend of mine, her name's Carissa. She works at school with me. Prior to working at school, she was a hairdresser and doing very well, ran her own business. Left that profession to come and work in a school, and then came across a girl who didn't know what she was doing with her life. Very much directionless. And so Carissa called all the contacts that she had to arrange a traineeship for this girl, including working out a way for her to get to the traineeship on the day. That girl eventually gave her life to the Lord. But Carissa took the risk of saying, I'm going to use the contacts that I have, not for our own benefit, but for someone else's benefit. If you want to see the power of this, feel free to just drive down Anzac Avenue and look at this weird white building that seems to have appeared on the corner there that many people here have invested coin in that will outlast us. You want to break free from the trap of greed, give to something that's bigger than yourself. That's the first. The second is to trust the one who provides. It would have been easy to finish the sermon and say, all right, everyone go be like more generous and less greedy. And some of you probably would have been because you're like just awesome at being committed. And many of us would have been like guilt-ridden and anxiety-ridden and like, I don't know, I'm going to do that. Good luck, good message, Michael, but not for me, thanks. But Jesus doesn't finish his message there. There's another parable or story that comes straight after that begins with the word therefore. And any of you who've done a bit of like how to read the Bible study stuff, you know that the therefore also is there for a reason. It's to explain the previous story. So if you just read the bigger barn story in isolation, you haven't got the full message. You need to read both. I've taken a few chunks out of that to kind of summarize it for you, but you're very welcome to read the whole section for yourself. It says this, therefore I tell you, this is Jesus speaking, do not worry about your life. That's a pretty hard thing to read, to be honest, hey? Do not worry about your life, what you'll eat, or about your body, what you will wear. Consider the ravens or the crows. We have a lot of crows around. They don't sow or reap. They have no bigger barns, yet God feeds them. Consider the wildflowers. They do not labor or spin, yet God clothes the grasses of the field. Your Father knows that you need these things, but seek his kingdom, and these things will be given to you as well. What this means is that the deepest antidote to greed is not guilt, it is trust. And generosity is simply what trust does with its money. Jesus is essentially drawing his disciples in close, and he's saying, you can trust me on this one. Release your grip. Invest in something that lasts, in something beyond yourself. And Jesus is saying, and I promise you will be okay. The Father will give you what you need. I have experienced this a little. I had this one experience where God was gracious enough to show me what he meant when he said this sort of stuff. Now, those of you who know me well, I'm a pretty cynical, straight down the line, fact sort of guy. Tell me what the research says. That's the sort of way I think. And every now and again, God decides to throw a bit of Pentecostalism at Michael, which I'd never know what to do with. But anyway, this happened to me maybe a dozen years ago. I had just finished my master's degree and felt like it'd be nice to go to the university to receive the certificate for having put that work in. So Beck and I thought, let's do that. At the same time, a moment arose where there was a giving opportunity, and I felt in my heart the idea that I should give $1,000, which was weird because I never think and feel things like that. I'm a male. I try not to feel at all if I can avoid it. And God kind of said a thing. I think he said a thing. He said, look, if you give 1,000, I'll give you 1,000. That's weird. I don't even believe in that sort of stuff. This is not the Michael world. The world according to Michael would rule that out. But I've bravely put $1,000 in. I'm like, all right, let's see what this goes. Words. That week, we'll hang out with my wife's parents, telling them we're going to go to Victoria to receive the certificate because that would be cool. And they gave us $500 towards it. I thought, but you said 1,000. Not long after, in our front door where they have like the screen, like a few days later, there was an envelope with $400 in it. But you said 1,000. That's still $100 to go. I still don't know to this day where that money came from. I have a theory, never have confirmed it. I'm in church not long after. Some random person in an incredibly weird and awkward way gave me $50. Which means there's still $50 to go, right? But this is weird. This just doesn't make sense to me. It doesn't fit my theology. And then when my parents dropped us off at the airport, my dad gave me $50 and said, this is for the taxi. It was exactly, I don't know how to explain that. I can't promise that it's going to happen to you, but I felt like, and I feel to this day, that was just God saying, you know how I said you can trust me on this? Here's a bit of proof for you. You can trust me on this. And I think God wants to say that to you as well. You can trust him on this one. On this whole piece of escaping greed, you can trust God. If God is for us, who can be against us? He did not spare his own son, but gave him up for us all. How will he not also, along with him, graciously give us all things? The God who feeds the ravens has not forgotten you. The God who clothes the fields is not careless about your life. The Father who has given you sainthood in his kingdom will not abandon you over tomorrow's bread. So do the bravely generous thing your heart is calling you to do. Make the leap. God promises you can trust him, and the cross proves he is trustworthy. John Wesley had these 3 things he would say to his people to help them overcome the power of greed. He said, number 1, gain all you can. Go for it. Without hurting anyone, be diligent. Gain all you can. Number 2, save all you can. by cutting off unnecessary expenses and wasting nothing on sin or folly. And number 3, give all you can. He says this, render unto God not a tenth, not a third, not half, but all that is God's, be it more or less, in such a manner that you may give a good account of your stewardship, and that every act may be rewarded in that day when the Lord comes again.
Hey guys, thanks for watching. We really hope you enjoyed that. 2 quick things before we go, okay? 1, we'd love to connect with you. Go to our website, lifepoint.org.au, hit connect, and just give us your details. Someone from our church will be in contact with you. And the second thing is, if you live in the area, around the kind of Moreton Bay or North Brisbane, come along to a service, 8:30, 10 o'clock and 5 p.m. We'd absolutely love to see you here on a Sunday.